This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Stay tuned for more info. Steven Universe. Alright, let's dial that back a bit. Steven Universe is a show that turns 10 years old later this year. I checked and I feel my lifespan withering away. It's a show you'd be hard pressed to find a single opinion piece on that doesn't have complicated feelings towards it. Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything, but it's been a good, I feel I've mellowed out a little and can view the show with a more aware lens and a much more stable head. For all of the show's faults, there's no denying its impact, both the emotional impact it had on many of us who were truly invested for the show's first 3 seasons, and on the industry at large. While I may look back on my previous thoughts on the show of conflicted feelings, agreeing and disagreeing with many of my past takes, positive and negative, I think I still have a place in my heart that loves this show in spite of its planet-sized issues. But that doesn't save it from scrutiny, because whether you love or hate Steven Universe from the bottom of your heart, there's no getting around how it has a bucket list of flaws in its storytelling that have been covered numerous times over the years, with videos greatly differing in quality. And as you've no doubt taken notice of by now, a lot of people really hate Steven Universe. Like, I mean, really hate Steven Universe. I don't exactly disagree with some of their line of thinking if it involves storytelling consistency or the handling of themes, or the massive amount of filler. You know, there's a number of valid reasons to critique the show. Do I think it deserves the near universal amount of scorn it's generated? Obviously no, if the show is anywhere near the top 10 worst things you've ever seen, and I doubt you watch a lot of shows anyway, but there are valid reasons for people to dislike this show. Let's now transition to the main topic of today, Steven Universe. That guy. If you've been wandering around the internet over the past few years, chances are you've seen this image, or this image, or this image, or something like, "We don't have to fight." That was weird. See, towards the end of Steven Universe, specifically the main show, a lot of criticism was rightfully directed towards the show's controversial decision to redeem the main antagonists of the series, the Diamonds. This decision is one that shows how at odds the show's themes and messages were with the epic backdrop of a battle between space tyrants, and this decision made the reputation of the show, and subsequently Steven's character, plummet. If you asked the average person what they thought of Steven as a character, they'd probably tell you that Steven forgave genocidal space dictators, that he's an emotional kid and a massive wuss, and that he's a bleeding heart pacifist who regularly forgives awful people. Steven Universe is a show that's easy to make fun of, and with this being how the original show went out, it left an incredibly dark blotch on the franchise. This is why you see memes about Steven crying his eyes out at someone being evil and begging them to change, or that image of the funny German guy, and they're all very funny, but I think people are taking them a bit too literally. Everywhere you go, you're likely to see people say the same things about Steven, because the show is viewed a lot more negatively these days, and the memes that originally exaggerated the problems of the show have inadvertently become the basis for a lot of people's growing resentment towards Steven Universe. But what if I told you that Steven did not forgive the Diamonds? That the show itself can be criticized for the horrible decision to put them on a redemption arc, but that there's evidence from the show's ending, the movie, and its sequel series that proves Steven shows far more disdain towards his estranged family than you might realize. I, as someone who used to criticize this show a lot and still stand by a lot of my prior critiques, believe that Steven is suffering from a large case of Flanderization. He is not a coward, and he is not as easily forgiving as you might think. This is not a pure-hearted defense of the show either. I'm going to be critical of the show in this video for sure, even if it mainly comes out of a place of love and respect. But I also want to give credit where it's due and to hopefully get people to see that there's far more to Steven than memes would have you believe. I aim for this to be a fair and honest look. I asked hundreds of people if they thought Steven was a bleeding heart pacifist who easily forgives terrible people. I'm not going to be responding to comments directly, but it's put a lot about the show's reputation and what a lot of people think of Steven into perspective for me. Strap yourselves in, we're looking at the Flanderization of Steven Universe. Remember how Steven hopped on a video call that one time only to leak what planet he was living on and the specific location of him and his family? Well, thanks to this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN, your experience online can be made far more safe and secure than that. In an age where the threat of your internet security is continuously put at risk, Surfshark, whether it's on Windows, Android, or Apple, allows you to become an anonymous and hard-to-track user with the click of a button, masking your IP and making sure that your city, country, and download history aren't linked to your identity, while also encrypting your online data if you were to connect to free public Wi-Fi, which is a goldmine for hackers. Surfshark also allows you to freely switch your location in over 3,200 servers in 100 countries, allowing you to view region-specific content on YouTube and streaming services alike. Just refresh the page after swapping countries and there you have it, simple as that. I've been using the service myself and this is easily one of my favorite features. Why is Persona 3 Germany exclusive? And if you use the link in the description below and enter the special code Cartoonchi, you'll not only get 83% off your first order, but the next 3 months are completely free. Thank you so much to Surfshark for the sponsor, and thank all of you for helping to support this channel. Let's dive right into everyone's favorite topic, genocide. I probably shouldn't use that word too much. Steven Universe has always been a show about love. and also a lot of other things, but also forgiveness and redemption. There are a lot of characters in the show that start out as antagonists, but over the course of the series begin changing into allies and friends of the Crystal Gems, largely thanks to Steven's pacifist approach to conflict. It should be worth noting not every character turns out this way, especially Jasper, but the show is dead set on giving characters who've made mistakes their own redemption story, and eventually earn their forgiveness. Steven approaches conflict in a very defensive manner, never directly attacking unless he needs to, and usually solving his problems with kindness and reason. Steven has garnered a bit of a negative public perception for being a very sensitive and emotional character who always approaches danger with pacifistic methods. He's a bit melodramatic, and even when the show was liked by the majority, people still made fun of how many scenes the show had of characters crying and singing when it came to conflict, which is where this image came from. But even with the idea in mind that the show is made fun of for being incredibly sincere and overbearing with its main themes, that's still something I largely appreciate about it. Teaching kids about kindness and forgiveness should be a good thing, and it's even better when you factor in the story and the characters who are written with adults in mind too. It's easy to see why the show struck a chord with so many people. However, the Diamonds are on a completely different level to any of the other antagonists. They are genocidal dictators who have spent thousands of years colonizing and stripping planets of organic life for resources to aid their empire. They are responsible for the deaths of untold numbers of people, including gems. Their presence has been known over the entire series. They were always portrayed as absolute monsters. They're one of the few characters on the wiki that has a scroll bar next to their crime section. They are the Achilles heel to Steven's pacifism. So then there's a rushed finale where they're put on the path to redemption, and yep, you see the problem. Let's not mince words here. Redeeming the Diamonds was a mistake. Allowing these dictators who are responsible for a laundry list of crimes to pretty much get off scot-free, even if they're technically on the path to becoming good people now, is an ethical yikes. While technically the best outcome as no one had to die, an ending like this is destined to be seen as problematic in the eyes of many, and I agree. But Steven did not forgive the Diamonds, nor did anyone in the show for that matter. The Diamonds were indeed redeemed, but their past actions haven't been forgotten and the characters still hold their grudges. I think the best place to begin would probably be with the movie. Throughout the movie, while Steven's uneasiness with the Diamonds can be just explained by the lol, they're goofy aunties now, and are begging him to stay on homeworld, it's still very clear it extends a fair bit beyond that. I mean, even this glare Steven and White share in the final episode of the main series is incredibly awkward, and factoring that in with Steven's disapproval towards the Diamonds trying their best to act kinder and less judgmental in the movie, it's clear there's far more to this than Steven's awkwardness playing off of them trying to smother him.
Judging anything based on appearance is wrong.
He's uncomfortable with them coming to live with him for a variety of reasons, and to those of you that know, well, you know one of them for sure. The final arc of the main series is littered with scenes showing that it's not just Steven that holds some resentment towards the Diamonds for their past actions. Everyone here is uncomfortable, and even though people are content with the Diamonds learning from their past and trying to do good, it doesn't mean they're owed forgiveness, not in the slightest. And no one actually shows the Diamonds forgiveness, which is something I don't think a lot of people realize because they're so taken aback by the poor narrative decision to not have them face proper consequences, and it ends up corrupting what they think actually happened. Rewatch Season 5 of Steven Universe, the Steven Universe movie, and Steven Universe Future, especially Future, and tell me how many characters are on screen either saying they forgive the Diamonds for their actions or are shown forgiving them in some way. I'll give you some time. Time's up. The answer is zero. Zibnada. There is not a single scene, not one piece of dialogue where any of the characters forgive the Diamonds in any capacity, especially Steven. At no point does Steven forgive White Diamond, or any of the Diamonds, because here's what Steven's line of thinking boils down to: the greater good. While it's not shoved in your face, Steven's self-sacrificing nature is evidently his biggest flaw, and it's intentional, and this isn't a cop-out, it ties directly into his character development from the beginning of the series till the very end. Wanna know my source? Well, I got you, bucko, it comes straight from Rebecca Sugar herself. She did an interview with CBR around the time Future ended, and I honestly wish I'd seen it before making my review of Future's ending, because it does make a few of my points look pretty silly in retrospect. I'll put the full interview in the description, but to paraphrase Sugar here, even back in Season 1, Steven was all about self-sacrifice in service of the greater good, whether that meant putting a stop to something bad or for other people's comfort. The test is one of the few times Steven puts the comfort of others above his own feelings, choosing to lie to the gems to make them feel better even though he feels disappointed and disrespected by them. Even though this is easy to forget given the show's massive gaps between continuity focus, this was a huge turning point for him as a character. He protects Connie by going against her wishes and sworn to the sword, and in Season 4's finale, he turns himself into Aquamarine and Topaz to keep everyone safe, something that Connie even calls him out on in Dewey Wins. Hey, the episode was worth something after all. While his pacifist approach can be seen as annoying to some people, it's still an intentional character flaw, it's not bad writing. There are plenty of cases of shaky writing in Steven Universe, and this just ain't one of them. With all of this in mind, we can also discuss the idea of Steven being a forgiving person, because I don't think he is. He approaches conflict usually in a conversational manner, and while he does forgive a good few characters for their prior actions, it's often after he's diffused the situation, not while he's trying to stop them. He's not the brightest bulb in the Hanukkah tree, but Steven is not a forgiving character to the point where he ignores his brain. Like, damn, do you guys remember Kevin? He f***ing hated that guy. He never forgave him once, and he hasn't even committed a crime. Well, he almost did that one time, but he's just a douchebag and Steven hates him. For a more serious example on top of that though, Steven wants nothing to do with Rose, his own mother, after finding out she was Pink Diamond and was responsible for doing a lot of terrible things. Even though Rose put all of it behind her and eventually became a rebel, choosing her found family and going against her own while protecting Earth, her past actions shattered the image Steven has in his mind of her. And while he accepts that she matured as a person, he doesn't like thinking about her and doesn't forgive the things she's done, especially later on when it came to Spinell's abandonment and volleyball being physically and emotionally scarred by her, as her list of sins keep growing long after Steven found out about her past and he's tired of hearing it, angrily declaring so. You know, I see a lot of memes about Steven crying while trying to forgive an awful person, and while they're definitely funny, you gotta admit at some point he's just gonna go, "What the f*** is your problem?" While Steven believes that there's good in everyone, I'd hesitate to call him a forgiving character, at least not an overly forgiving one. You can make the argument that he's inconsistent in who he chooses to forgive, but I don't really see it that way because he doesn't forgive as liberally as people would have you believe. Which brings us back to the Diamonds. Steven's thoughts on the Diamonds are very clear of how much he flat out does not respect them for what they did in the past. In the show's finale, he puts his feelings about the situation to one side in service of what he sees as the greater good. He tries to negotiate. He wants everything to work out without having to resort to violence. I still don't think treating the Diamonds like this is a good ending, but for Steven as a character, it's in line with what he's known for, and he doesn't actually forgive any of them. However, if you've taken note of all of this and still want to claim that Steven forgives them deep down or something like that, well, Steven Universe Future, here we are. You know, looking back, it's honestly pretty funny how much of Future was written to address parts of the show that were criticized. I mean, I still don't like Future. I still don't think that it handles PTSD very well, especially now that I've had my own near-death experience a few months back that stuck with me for a really long time now. But plenty of moments in Future felt like the show was constantly putting its foot down and making sure people understood some things that were either undercooked in the main series or were just casually overlooked by people. We learned in Future that Steven's adventures as a kid have traumatized him, and he's not mentally sound at all. This gradual decline in his mental health reaches a boiling point with 2 episodes in particular. One of them, where he goes to Homeworld, witnesses the writers absolutely obliterating Spinell's character in under 10 minutes, and has a moment where he gains control of White Diamond. And during this sequence, we finally get a sense of just how badly he was affected by the Diamonds and the amount of resentment he has for them. He puppeteers White while shrouded in darkness and attempts to kill her by making her ram her head so hard into a pillar that it would shatter her gem, declaring, "This is for everything you put me through," before getting pulled out at the last second. If that isn't proof enough that Steven doesn't like the Diamonds at all, I don't know what is. And I don't want to hear arguments of, oh, but this is after the main series, so actually everything is canon. This is an extension of the story. Unrelated to the Diamonds, there's also the scene where Steven straight up shatters Jasper, after Jasper's unhealthy advice pushes Steven off the deep end, causing him to stop holding back. He regrets this, obviously, bringing Jasper back shortly after, which should just not be possible, but it's clear Steven still has conflicted feelings about Jasper. The first episode of Future is all about his frustration at how they won't change, and how he just unloads his anger on them. Even though Jasper was egging him on to stop holding back, they're still his feelings. So to finally put an end to this part of the discussion, Steven did not forgive the Diamonds. Full stop. But to add on to that, Steven's not even a really forgiving person, and I'm still struggling to see how he fits that mold after rewatching the series. I do believe Steven's an inconsistent character, and I have a long list of complaints about how the show executes its plot and develops its characters, but Steven to me feels like he's been incredibly Flanderized, stemming from criticism of the show, to jokes exaggerating the issues, and then eventually those jokes overtaking the rational discussion to the point where Steven being a crybaby pacifist is essentially all he's known for now. And people just don't really defend it because Steven Universe is a show that's pretty widely disliked these days, for understandable reasons as well as absolutely insane ones. Like, I'm not a writer for this show, but even back in my original videos from years ago, I don't think I ever trashed bashed Steven's character this hard. I'd say Steven redeems far more than he does forgive, and that people easily conflate the two, given how similar they are on the surface. But there's a massive difference between forgiving people for what they've done and allowing them to become better. I think people need to remind themselves of that when they critique the show, because 2 years ago I got semi-convinced that was the case due to not watching the show for a good while, and from seeing how many people say it was true. But it isn't. To round off this video, I wanted to take a look at a smaller part of the argument, Steven being a wimp, because trust me, he's not. If anything, he's one of the braver characters in the show, with his whole self-sacrifice thing going on, and while he does mainly act in self-defense during battles, it's not out of cowardice. I want to remind people that the idea of Steven being a blubbering mess who gives long emotional speeches to solve all of his problems started as a joke spawning from people's grievances with his character. This has effectively been spun into representing who Steven is and how he approaches conflict, but it just isn't true. Not saying Steven's gonna go toe-to-toe with Frieza anytime soon or start making the penguin quiver in his boots, but he's capable of throwing hands, even in a defensive manner, and in future we get a glimpse of just how strong his powers actually are. Even if he chooses to not use them, even if Steven's capable of fighting, it doesn't definitively prove anything. Well, again, you'll just have to watch the show, because there are very few times where Steven encounters the threat past season 1 and acts out of cowardice, or solely tries crying and begging them to listen to reason. I mean, when the chips are down and he's at knife point, he'll kick someone out into deep space just to survive. There are so many scenes where Steven is simply outmatched and he just faces it head on. When he first meets Spinel, he at first tries reasoning with her until she attacks and poofs the gems, causing Steven to finally act and stop her. Generally, if Steven has a reason to, he will try and talk with people instead of attacking them, like when Bismuth suggests shattering and killing the diamonds, causing her to flip out and see Steven exactly as she saw Rose when he rejects the idea. Steven's trying to protect himself the entire fight until his life is in immediate danger. Steven ain't a pussy. I'd pay good money to watch him and Jack Horner battle to the death, but he ain't gonna start crying, he will try and throw hands. Especially future Steven, who for some reason seems to be the one present on a lot of these memes, despite being the version of Steven who's less likely to deal with things patiently. He's nearly an adult now, he has a lot of angst, a temper, and while lots of that comes from his settling PTSD, he's also not as blindly optimistic as he was as a kid. I mean, that image of him crying is literally from the final episode where he says goodbye to everyone before leaving the city, not when he's trying to forgive someone. Just thought that was worth mentioning. At the end of the day, I have very complicated feelings towards Steven Universe, and I bet most of you watching do too. I also bet there will be plenty of people who will find something disagreeable in what I'm saying, whether that's about my defense of the show or my critiques. This video was made because even as someone who's been harsh about this show in the past, despite me still loving it for what it tried to do and the fond memories I have of the first 3 seasons, I thought it would be interesting to do a semi-defense of one of the show's most shaky but misunderstood parts. Hope you guys enjoyed and can at least walk away from this video a bit more informed. Okay, but are the diamonds still gonna get away with all that shit, or? Just a reminder to click the link in the description below and use the promo code CartoonChi for 83% off your initial order on Surfshark VPN and for the next 3 months to be completely free.